Joining me now, Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz, Republican member of the House Armed Services, Judiciary and Budget Committees. Congressman, welcome to you, sir. And I know that you have weighed in certainly on these NFL protests, and you're in fact quoted as suggesting that taxpayers are being ripped off for their money, subsidizing teams with protesting players. So can you explain what you mean by that?
Well, NFL players are certainly able to protest under the First Amendment. I just think they ought to do it on their own time and on their own dime. Right now, one of the special interest loopholes in our tax code allows the league offices of professional sports league to avoid paying taxes. That's crazy. That's a special interest giveaway that the small businesses in my district certainly don't have access to. And so I've introduced legislation to abolish the special tax exemption that the NFL enjoys and that all other professional sports leagues enjoy. I think that's fairer for folks on Main Street and folks in the middle class.
How much of this reflects colleagues within your side of the caucus there in the House? And I do know that this particular legislation, isn't it the same one that Jason Chaffetz had proposed, but since he left in June, you're picking up the ball, right?
That's correct. This Pro Sports Act was originally sponsored by Congressman Chaffetz, and it had been orphaned upon his departure from the Congress, and it is an orphan no more. I'm glad to stand up against this type of special interest loophole. I mean, there is no rational reason why league offices of professional sports leagues that collectively generate about $2 billion in revenue should get a special tax benefit. And I think it's in line with the overall objectives of the tax reform that the president wants to see and that the Congress wants to see. We want a tax system that doesn't pick winners and losers, that has lower, fair, flat rates that are easy to understand, and that'll generate the type of dynamic economic growth that we need to see in the country.
Isn't your beef, though, with the overall breaks in the tax code for sports leagues in general? I mean, why single out African-American players who are protesting racial injustice?
Well, this doesn't single out anyone. This legislation that I've taken over from Congressman Chaffetz would apply equally to all professional sports leagues. But certainly when you see a sports league like the NFL embrace what I perceive to be very unpatriotic activity, it leads to the question, why would we give folks that are engaged in this anti-Americanism some special break? It makes no sense. We sometimes use the tax code to try to achieve some social objective. Frankly, that's not been something we've been successful at as a country, but why would we give them a special break? And so that's why I propose eliminating the break for everyone.
I'm curious very quickly with these protests that we've seen today, sir. As you know, last weekend there was a lot of taking the knee, the president opposing that specifically, saying it disrespects our flag. Today it's a little bit different. We're seeing players locking arms in solidarity, far more overwhelming. That's been the depiction on the field today during the national anthem as opposed to taking a knee. How do you feel about that expression?
Well, you've been covering that, Alex. I don't really get it. I mean, I get that they're trying to express unity, but unity for what? And it highlights one of the real problems with this whole protest deal in the NFL.
They have been clear with what the unity is about. They're saying that it's about racial injustice, about injustice across this country on many, many levels. I think they've been pretty clear about that. So that's what the locking of the arms is implying.
I'll make this offer. I'm a member Judiciary Committee that oversees these criminal justice issues. Any member of the NFL, any player, any of their representatives that actually want to come and talk about real reforms, my door is open. But that's not what we've seen. We haven't seen any proposal for solutions, any sort of change that would lead to greater equality or greater justice. All we've seen is this highly overgeneralized indictment of the country. When you kneel for the anthem, it is not localized or specific to racial inequality. That's a sign of disrespect to all of my constituents who are serving overseas to protect our freedom and advance our country's interests. And so getting a little more specific about what changes NFL players would like to see, I think would be very productive. I think it would enhance bipartisan unity on, frankly, some issues that we could all add a solution to. But what we're seeing now is not that. It is an indictment of America, and frankly, they don't deserve a special tax break while they're doing it.
I will say, Congressman, that those with whom I've spoken and what I've read, it's not an indictment of our flag, of our country, or of the military. It is about the things that we have said before. That's what I've heard
They're
from
kneeling
these players
for the flag, Alex. Look, they're not making any statement about racial equality. They're not proposing any solutions. They're just getting out there like overpaid prima donnas kneeling while the national anthem is playing, while we've got service members standing, while we've got veterans reflecting upon their service to the country. I think it's very it's a very imprecise indictment. Why not get to the actual issues you want to solve?
Well, Congressman, look, I understand that's your opinion, and I respect that you have that opinion. I will say those with whom I have spoken, the opinion is not going to be reflected in what you're saying. That said, I do want to talk about taxes with you because a majority of your constituents make between, I think it's $35,000 and $59,000 a year. This is according to a nonpartisan tax policy institute. The tax break with this middle-class miracle, as it's being called by the president, would be between $290 to $660, compared to the top 1% making $732,000 a year, getting $129,000 a year of a tax break. How does this not sound like a tax cut for the rich?
Well, there are all kinds of great opportunities for the middle class in this tax bill, and I don't think that the numbers you've just cited reflect the benefit that will befall all Americans when we have dynamic economic growth. I mean, just when we bring the trillions of dollars that are currently sitting overseas back into the American economy, that means that those middle class folks in my district will have wage growth. It'll mean that they have more security in their existing jobs, and they'll have a platform to achieve more prosperity and more economic opportunity. So we can't just look at tax reform in a static way where we calculate the exact dollars that you'll get back tomorrow in your paycheck. You have to look at the conditions for economic growth that will be the rising tide that will lift all boats and lift up all Americans. The Democrats in Congress.
Why not give proportionately to all Americans the same level of tax cut?
Well, because we're giving more tax cuts to the middle class. When you enhance the child tax credit, that disproportionately helps the middle class. When you double the standard exemption, as this blueprint does, that helps the middle class more. And this is just a blueprint. I think it's important to note there is no bill drafted. There is no law about to be voted on. And I'll tell you this, the President of the United States is pushing on Congress to ensure that there's not a real windfall for the wealthy, that the real growth that comes as a consequence of this tax cut will be felt in the paychecks and rising wages and enhanced opportunities for regular people in this country who just want to follow the rules. You know, regular folks don't need a 70,000-page tax code. That exists for the special interest and the connected, and by simplifying the tax code, we'll create more opportunities for the middle class.
Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate your